Hello, hello, I'm Kats, and welcome back to the free-to-play review. The time has finally come. It is the official Leo guaranteed event located in the Swordmaster's Path. Finally, coming at the very, very end, it seems, of the collaboration between Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Raid Shadow Legends. So you can see there, the big banner, the champion up for grabs, Leonardo, and then his 5-star soul as well. So let's dive right in to the Swordmaster's Path. Now, the first thing that I always like to look for when it comes to these heroes' paths are there any keys? Yes, there are 2. And what do the keys unlock? So we can see here on the bottom left-hand side, we have Leonardo for a whopping 80,000 points. And then on the right-hand side, we have the 5-star soul for the 50,000 points. And so you will need to get at least one of the keys if you want to go for one of them. You'll need to get both of the keys if you want to go for both of them, the champion and the 5-star soul. Getting points in this particular iteration of the hero's path is going to be a combination of gear hunters as well as summoning champions, as you'd expect. So a summon rush, meaning that we have the standard amount of points for each of the different shard types and a pretty standard amount of coins for each of the different dungeon stages. But of course, as I always iterate or reiterate when it comes to these types of events, is that the dungeon diver aspect is more of a bonus. You can offset a handful of shards with a decent amount of grinding in some dungeons, but majority of the points you're meant to gain are going to be from shards. So I've gone through and mapped out a handful of paths that people might want to pursue when it comes to this particular path. Interestingly enough, and I was kind of curious if it was going to be the case, but one of the cheapest things you could do is get yourself down to the mythical tome here. So if you're ignoring the champion, the relic fragments, the soul, and everything else, and you just want to min-max and get yourself one mythical tome, you can literally come straight down the center, notably go through the keys for, again, the cheapest route, straight to the mythical tome for only 29,750 points. So believe it or not, it is actually more expensive to get a legendary tome here. The left-hand one or the right-hand side, they're identical in terms of points. But if you wanted to get one of those tomes coming down, let's say, for example, the left-hand side, you would unfortunately have to go get a key. So you do have to come down the middle, grab at least the one key, and then you come back down the left-hand side all the way to the legendary tome, and that will cost you a grand total of 32,500 points. So it is actually more expensive to get a legendary tome from a mythical tome. But of course, the legendary tome, if you were to go for it, will be all along the way towards getting the champion and or the soul. Next up would be the 100 mythical relic fragments. Of course, you would come down pretty much the same path as the mythical tome. However, you wouldn't go through the mythical tome. You'd go through either the 9,000 or the 5-star chicken or the barrel, and that would cost you a grand total of 48,750 points, again focusing just on the center path and notably going through the keys again just for the cheapest path. Obviously, if you want the other relic fragments, that would be respectively more expensive. Next on the list is the 5-star soul. So once again, you'd have to come down through the center, grab the key, come down the entirety of the right hand side through the legendary tome, and then grab yourself the 5-star soul for 82,500 points. And last but not least, the same thing. If you want to replicate that on the left hand side, you'd go the same thing, grab the key from the center, come down the left hand side all the way to the champion Leonardo, and then that would cost you a grand total of 112,500 points. Now, if you wanted to be a big spender and get the soul and the champion, you would have to get both of the keys down the center path, come down both the left hand side fully and the right hand side fully, and that would be a whopping 195,250 points. So this is definitely an expensive path, and it's definitely one of the most expensive paths I would say we've ever seen in terms of the quality of the rewards that people would want and just how the sheer cost to get them. Which of course is a brilliant segue to hop over to the spreadsheet, which will be linked in the description box down below, and we are in the Heroes Path Calculator tab at the moment. So as I always like to highlight, there is the breakdown of the Gear Hunter section. You'll get some points depending upon which stage you're running in dungeons. So normal mode, stage 20, 24, 25, and hard mode, stage 6 and stage 10. And so you can see the respective values in terms of coins per average coins per run, average coins per energy. And then of course, if you're running the campaign for one reason or another, you will get some points from doing that as well from the shields, assuming you're doing 12-3 on brutal. But of course, the primary mode of gaining points is going to be from the summon rush aspect, as we highlighted earlier. So as usual, all of the paths that I talked about are broken down here in their respective columns, and we can see the amount of shards it's going to take for each different shard type to go for some of these rewards. So notable things here, the legendary tome, like we talked about, it is technically more expensive than the mythical tome. The mythical tome would be the equivalent of 7 sacreds, while the legendary tome would be the equivalent of 8 sacreds. And typically for just a standard hero's path that has a legendary tome in it, it usually is around 5 to 6, maybe 7 worst case sacred. So this is definitely a more expensive legendary tome. But again, for most people, they're probably interested in the champion, meaning that you'll get the legendary tome along the way towards going for the soul and or the champion. And speaking of which, if you do want Leonardo, he is going to cost a whopping 25 sacred shards or the equivalent, and the soul itself will cost 19 sacreds itself. So again, fairly expensive soul, 20 sacreds worth, and or the champion being 25 sacreds worth. Ridiculously and potentially prohibitively expensive, depending upon how many shards you happen to have. And then if you wanted to be, again, the big spender, you would need 44 sacreds or the functional equivalent to get yourself the champion and the soul just from shards 100%. So again, very, very, very costly path if your goals are to do, everything that's possible. Even if you wanted to dive into the other different shard types, 650 ancients, 261 voids, 109 primals. So a lot of people would be like decimating their entire account to guarantee the champion and the soul. So with all that said, you might be wondering what my plan is relative to this hero's path. I can confirm that I am indeed going for the champion himself, so going all the way down the left-hand side to get myself the Leonardo. So that will end up costing me somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 sacreds. Of course, as my usual plan is, I will be farming dungeons over the next 3 days to offset some cost of some shards, but realistically speaking, that might only be worth maybe like 2 sacreds worth, and so I'd still end up ripping through about 23 sacreds to get this done. So that is, it'll help, of course, it's worth doing, but nonetheless, it's not going to make a huge dent in the overall cost here relative to something like, going from a 9 sacred cost to a 7 sacred. It's a lot more substantial difference there, but I digress. When it comes to the soul, I think it's just prohibitively expensive to go for both, as you may have been able to pick up how I was just kind of describing the numbers there. I think souls are great to have on champions, especially, your meta ones, your most powerful ones, but when it comes at such a high cost, meaning that it's basically 20 sacreds on its own just for the soul, that just seems so ridiculously expensive that's not really worth that amount of shards, especially when I can just farm the soul over time. And more importantly, the 5-star soul is not the most crucial step in a nuker's progression as far as the blessings are concerned. 4-star is probably where you want to stop in most cases, because that's where you unlock the crit damage. And for Leonardo, you go through the 3-star, meaning you get the defense. So getting the 4-star awakening for him isn't that costly in terms of the resources, the coins. But getting to 5-star would be expensive. Getting to 6-star would be even more. But farming him up to 4-star just seems like a way better use to my overall resources than just burning through another 20 sacreds to get that done. So once again, my plan is just to go for Leo, and then I'll just stop right there. But you could be in a great position if you happen to have pulled Leo in the past from just one of his boosted rates events or one of the summon pools, something like that. Then it could be a great deal for you to just get out there, get the soul, and move on. However, again, you could also farm it up depending upon your goals and the amount of resources that one has. In terms of a formal recommendation of what you should do, I think it really just depends on what you want out of this event. I think, again, the champion is probably definitely more important. So if you have to choose between one or the other, obviously the soul doesn't matter if you don't have the champion. But I definitely think majority of people can get by with just the champion on his own. He doesn't necessarily have to be awakened to function in any team, especially a turtle team. And I think just the soul is kind of icing on the cake, especially if you just simply cannot afford both, or you don't want to blow up your entire account just for this, because it might screw you over the next 1, 2, 3 or so fusions and whatnot in the futures and or Titan events. And we are a good ways out from the Christmas time, over a month and a half, but it is worth noting that over the past 2 years, they have done the Yuletide Titan event at the end of the year. And in those 2 years, they have given out a Christmas-related champion, a Void Legendary, guaranteed, just kind of like they did with April O'Neil. And so just keep that in the back of your mind that you might want to save up some resources or have some resources saved up, because you might be able to get yourself a cool Void Legendary champion from just, from the Christmas time, when they're probably going to do another Yuletide Titan event. So yeah, definitely be sure to try and offset as much as you can with Dungeon Divers. Again, it's not going to get you a ton of points, but it might get you, save you 2 sacreds or something, just because you might be that little short relative to whatever goal you're going for in this path. So just keep that in mind, that you don't necessarily have to rip your shards on the first day. Try to get as much Dungeon Divers done as possible, and then see what the remaining balance is. All right, so that is going to do it for the free-to-play review of the Swordmaster's path. Let me know in the comment section down below, what is your plan relative to this hero's path? Are you going for Leo? Are you going for Leo and the soul? Have you blown up your entire account in pursuit of him or both? And of course, let me know what you happen to get along the way from your shard summons. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And also feel free to hit the subscribe button down below if and only if you're enjoying the content on this channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.